the Vuelta's version of Friday the 13th. Stage 13. And more riders regaining contact with that small peloton. Coming up from the back, Espana setting the pace at the front for the overall race leader, Vincenzo Nibali.
Well, remember, over the top of the Rock Penat, we had Nibali with a couple of teammates and maybe 30, 35 guys in the peloton, but we knew that was going to swell because they're not going full gas. They don't care about the breakaway. They're fine letting that breakaway take the time bonuses, win the stage. Nobody's a threat on general classification, so they're just going to keep it steady. And lots of guys are going to keep catching up to the back of the peloton. And then when they get closer to the finish, well, we'll see if other teams start to do the real chasing to see if they can bring back the breakaway.
3 minutes with 36 kilometers left to go. Stage 13 of the Vuelta a Espana live here on Universal Sports. Pharma Quick-Step riding at the front. Earlier they had Gianni Meersman in the breakaway, and he would have been a good candidate for the win had he stayed in the move, but he's dropped back to this field, so maybe they're trying to pull him back up to the front.
Yeah, he really would have wanted to hang over the Rock Penat climb, but he got his ticket punched, and so that really changes the dynamics. This entire Omega Pharma Quick-Step team would have been so happy to have him in the lead group of 10 because he'd be the overwhelming favorite, and Chosti now has gone down in the break. Back on his bike very fast.
Saw him shaking the quads out a moment ago at the very tail end of that break, and now getting back on, and let's see what happened.
He just blew the line. Ooh,
wow.
Ouch.
Came in too hot.
He had a bad line. He was on the inside of the corner, and so did not have a good line. You know, carbon fiber bike, carbon fiber front wheel, right into the curb, and didn't even seem to mess up the wheel.
Field at 10K left to go.
One moment of inattention. You set up for a corner wrong, and it can be the end of your race. All right, here we go.
All right, so this is from the front group, guys, finally starting to attack with just under 8 kilometers left.
That's Egoy Martinez for Euskaltel out front. Right behind him in the red jersey, Coppel. Scarponi back here now working with some others to try and close it down.
Nocentini behind him for AG2R, Barguil, and then Santa Romita here at the back.
And some speed bumps there as well. Looks to me like Martinez really caught everybody by surprise when he went. Mollema getting across. And so it's Coppel and Martinez.
So they've split up with just over 7 kilometers left to go. Now will it stay like this? 2 riders at the front, 3 chasing, then 4 behind. 7K banner for Martinez and Coppel. And the 4 riders at the back closing the gap on the is coming back together. Now will they reel in the front 2?
And this all comes down to how motivated everybody is. The front 2 guys, if they work together, they're going to be all in, whereas this rear group, it's a bigger group, and some guys might start sitting on, guys might jump across, and so then they get disorganized. But it does look like the front 2 are going to get reeled in right now. And this must be
crash again.
This is the peloton.
Oh yeah,
that's another crash.
Same spot, the exact same spot where Chosti went down. It looked like it was an Omega Pharma Quick-Step rider who was laying there at the curb.
A nasty little corner. Coppel, Martinez.
But just seconds ahead of the remainder of that breakaway.
And Martinez having a good look back. They're trying to figure this out.
There's still 6 kilometers to go. They're going to get caught here.
And sometimes it's just so touch and go, and you have to make that decision. Like, if we keep driving it right now, are we going to break the will of the chasers? Or are we going to get caught and then have nothing left?
And apparently Daniel Moreno was also in that crash. We saw the replay of a moment ago, including the Omega Pharma Quick-Step rider underneath that bridge or the tunnel where that tight turn came that also caught Entrusty by surprise for Movistar. Coppel, Martinez, 1-2 at the front of the stage right now with 5.5 kilometers to go, but the camera swings back. That's how close everybody else is right here. Go across.
It does.
He's in the middle.
It does look like Scarponi, and still they almost had the 2 leaders caught. They messed around a little bit, and now the gap opening up once again.
Back.
They do the heavy math while they're racing, but regardless, that's what they got to be thinking about.
4K to go. Coppel in the red, Martinez the orange, Scarponi the pink. The very front of the stage. 10-man breakaway has come apart. 7 riders just a couple of seconds behind our trio at the front.
And look at this. It's just holding so close together, these 2 groups. The front group driving hard, the 5 chasers driving hard. It's just waiting for somebody either at the front to give up, but otherwise it could still come back together.
Now the peloton content to let these riders decide it in the final 4 kilometers of stage 13. Scarponi, Martinez, and Coppel in that order.
You can see Scarponi got across. He was blown when he got there, but just a little bit of recovery. This is the big 180 that's just over 3K from the finish line.
They'll have another big looping turn like this just inside of the 1K banner. A traffic circle in the last few hundred meters, and remember, it's uphill in the last 500 meters, averaging 7%. A couple of years ago at the Volta a Catalunya, the same finish was a 3rd category climb. Today it's unrated, but it's the same road, so it's going to go uphill. It's going to have an impact on whoever is sprinting for a stage win. Now Martinez starts to get out of the saddle as the others are about to catch back on. Barguil leading the riders behind.
Barguil in his first Grand Tour. Martinez up the road, became a professional in 2002, 11 years ago. So we have youth, we have experience, and they're all coming back together right now.
And it's all going to come back together with just over 2 kilometers left to go. Well, Scarponi made a big effort to bridge from one group to the next. Now he's at the front. What are his legs like right now? Martinez and Coppel also went pretty hard. How much are they feeling the effects of that effort?
I saw a bunch of guys taking some really hard pulls. Coppel jumping again, but this time it's not going to happen. Zondio right on him.
Barguil right behind him in the white for Argos. 2 kilometers left to go.
We're going to be treated to 9 guys that are all pretty much empty when they get to the final 400-meter climb, and it's going to be a slow motion grind to the death for whoever can hold out and win the stage.
Chiruka leading the group at the bottom of the screen to try and close this gap to the 4 riders up top.
And you can see how hard it is. These guys are all on fumes right now. They have been punching each other really hard, and guys are starting to come unglued.
Now the delicate dance you have to do. You want to sit in and ride in the draft, but you don't want to be gapped off. You don't want to have to use more energy that you won't have at the finish, because again, it goes uphill. You're going to need everything you have at that point. Barguil rotates to the front in the white for Argos.
And goes for a little bit of a flyer. Remember, he won the Tour de l'Avenir last year. He's a very young rider, 22 in his first Grand Tour, and they're giving him some breathing space right now.
Well, you look around for a few seconds, you could lose the race at this point.
And Barguil, once again, that Tour de l'Avenir is really known as the race of the future. It's for the guys who are just getting into the professional ranks that you expect to see more of.
There's the 1K banner, just over half a mile to go. A big looping turn here. Roundabout still to come, and uphill in the final 500 meters.
I can't imagine Barguil is going to be able to hold this all the way. Bocamolima on the front, then Martinez.
Santa Romita behind him.
And then Nocentini at the bottom of your screen. I'm starting to wonder if Nocentini's going to be the man. I haven't seen him make any really hard efforts to close down the gaps. And if you got a little bit of freshness right now, it could serve you very well.
Well, not getting a glimpse of Barguil, though. Here's that roundabout that they're coming in and have to deal with. Barguil is out front here.
Oh, he's got a nice gap. Now this is the grind uphill all the way to the line.
The last half kilometer uphill at 7%. Barguil in the white for Argos, trying to hang on for the stage win. He has a gap on the others. Did they wait too long?
I think they did, Steve. They are not starting the charge soon enough. I think Barguil is going to ride away with this.
They were looking around. Nobody wanted to take up the chase, and now Warren Barguil may steal the show after just over 4 hours.
Inside the final 75 meters, he's got it.
A solo win for Warren Barguil of Argos on stage 13 of the Vuelta. Nocentini will take second, just ahead of Mollema. Santa Romita fourth, and Xabi Zondio rounds out the top 5 for Team Sky.
And that's exactly what we're talking about. When you get to those tactical finishes like that, they had a big gap over the peloton, so they had plenty of time to play games with each other. Barguil attacked at the perfect time. What a win. Look at the excitement on his face.
And now the field still making their way towards the finish. Now the French cyclist, biggest day of his career. First-year rider for the Argos team. They missed out on the sprints with some of the younger riders earlier in the race. Guys like Arndt, Sinkeldam. Such a young squad that they have brought to this Vuelta. Never got the lead-out train dialed in. They tried on several different occasions, but each time they were left behind, and finally, from a breakaway, they get a stage win. Now Movistar Cannondale leading the way for the field as they come into the barriers.
And really, there's not a whole lot at stake here for the peloton. All the time bonuses are taken. What they just want to watch out for are time gaps, because it is a steep uphill to the finish. So watch for the GC men to just be close to the front as they come around the final corner, and make sure that they don't lose time because there's a split in the bunch. Of course, you always have to watch just to see if someone tries to pop off that's a general classification threat.
Now remember, Benyat and Chosti crashing when he was a member of that breakaway group through that tunnel as he came in too hot around a corner.
And he holds off the peloton, but does not get an opportunity to contest the finish of the race with the leaders.
Here comes his teammates leading the way.
Basso in fourth, Horner up there. They're just going to watch each other. Keep an eye out for Perito Rodriguez, Valverde, see if they try and get any time, but it does not look like they're going to.
Finishing over 2.5 minutes behind our stage winner. Here comes Philippe Gilbert up to the line as well.
Yeah, it looked like Diego Ulissi leading that field across. I don't see any separation in there.
So it is the Frenchman, Warren Barguil, his first ever Grand Tour stage win here on the 13th day of the 2013 Vuelta a Espana. He probably thought it was going to be, because they were looking around behind him. Nobody started the chase when he made that move, and he was able to hold off everybody by a pretty comfortable margin after 4 hours on the bike. And Barguil leads the rest of the breakaway into the finish. 7-second gap at the line for the Frenchman, who gets the win. Stage number 13 from a breakaway in the Vuelta a Espana. We'll check out the general classification and look ahead to the big weekend of climbing at the Vuelta when we come back. The general classification riders coming across more or less together here, including Vincenzo Nibali in the red jersey, maintaining his spot as the leader in the overall general classification. No change at the top. As our four contenders still separated by just 46 seconds, Nibali, Roach, Valverde, and Horner. Wet weather at the finish, the race unfolding out on the road. Daniele Ratto of Cannondale, a lone leader on the descent of the third to last climb of the day. He has under 40 kilometers left to go. The peloton thinning out behind him. Of our lone leader, Daniele Ratto of the Cannondale team. He is out front right now on the descent of the Category 2 climb that summited with 39 kilometers left to go on the stage. Now, Philippe Gilbert is about 2 minutes back. He's a lone chaser right now. Behind him, there is another chase group of 8 riders who are a little more than 8 minutes behind Ratto here, and then just over a half minute behind them, a small peloton that includes the top general classification riders, Vincenzo Nibali, Chris Horner, Alejandro Valverde, and Nicholas Roach. But it's a small peloton of just about 30 riders. The weather and the climbing have taken their toll so far today.
Big bad day in the mountains with a lot of nasty weather to go along with it. We've had men crashing out of the race, multiple men withdrawing due to very cold and even hypothermic conditions, including Luis Leon Sanchez, who was part of the 5-man break, crashed on the descent, got back on his bike, and later has retired with hypothermia.
Temperature in the 40s today. It has been raining from the outset after sunny and warm temperatures in the first 2 weeks of the Vuelta. This is the first really bad weather day the riders have encountered, and it probably could not come at a worse time with 4 significant climbs today. They went over the highest point of the Vuelta earlier in this stage with right around 70 kilometers to go. They climbed up to almost 8,000 feet. Ratto just went over a Category 2 climb. He's on the descent now. They still have another Cat 2 to come inside the final 20K, and then a Category 1 leading up to a summit finish in the last 10K of the race today.
Steve, you can see the guys kind of tackling all sorts of mountains today from that profile. Ratto on the climb there, the second Category 2 climb now. The field still back behind, finishing up their descent. And Ratto, this is a big bid for him. He has a large advantage over the peloton, and he just may think that he can turn this into a victory. But that general classification battle behind should be fierce, and they should be chewing up the ground between themselves and the lone breakaway man on the final climb.
That's Eros Kopecky, number 2 from Movistar, struggling at the back here. And this is the third group on the road right now. And guys, just trying to hang on in the weather in some cases. This is back to the front of that reduced main field, again led by the red and white team of Katusha here.
It looks like a Zaitsev on the front, but I have to say, for Ratto up here and all of the men in the bike race today, when you're in a bike race and it's cold and wet like this, the legs, typically the smaller guys, the worse it is, but the legs just won't respond. Your muscles are cold, all your body is freezing cold, and you're trying just to stay warm. Your muscles get tight, and look at this. Ratto taking the foot out just in case.
And there's Vincenzo Nibali with the unzipped jacket. You can see the red jersey just peeking out from underneath it. He's sitting right at the front of that main field. This is back to our lone leader, Ratto, who apparently has just gone over the summit of the Comea, so he's further along in the stage than we thought he was.
Love his style, though. He's got that foot out. He's ready to hot foot it just in case. And you never see guys descend like this, Steve, but he was in that move with Luis Leon Sanchez, who crashed on a descent earlier. He's out of the race now. Ratto just playing his cards a little bit safe.
All right, so to take stock of where we are, inside of 16 kilometers left to go to the finish for Ratto. He has 2 minutes on Philippe Gilbert, who is the next man on the road. Another larger chase is over 8 minutes back, and then this main field, 8:40 down. That's at the last time split we were given. So at this point, let's start with Ratto. What are his chances of winning the stage?
I think they're actually very good at this point. I think the battle that we expected to suck up everybody in dry conditions has been a battle of survival back here in the group with the red jersey there, Nibali in third spot. So they're not really going to suck up that breakaway group. That group got a lot of time, and now it just becomes survival for everybody.
So he has gone over the summit of the first 3 climbs. He has the Category 1 Colada de la Gallina to come at the finish as we get another look at this unique style on the corners of the descent.
Well, you can see the stakes are high, so he's got a big enough lead with a couple minutes over Gilbert. Better not to risk it on the descent right now. It's better just to be conservative and save everything for the climb and not go off the road and hit a guardrail, or who knows what, even worse, you could go flying over the guardrail.
Now expanding his lead over the field to more than 9 minutes and using every inch of the road.
Well, one of the challenges about the that'll make you pucker up a little bit. One of the challenges about taking your foot out like that is you actually have less balance and less control on the bike. But if you do slide out, well, then you have a decent shot at, oh man, I am getting scared watching this guy go down.
It's almost like you can't be conservative enough.
Yeah, and we saw what happened to Bradley Wiggins in the Giro d'Italia earlier this year on a rainy descent. He crashed, he lost all his nerve, and he lost a bunch of time on a day that nobody expected to be very decisive. So you have to stay loose, you have to somehow keep your nerve, and yet every single corner, it's literally, you could be out of the bike race.
All right, so this is the reduced main field that still has to go up the Category 2 Colmeia climb, and then they have the Cat 1 at the end as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of general classification battle we get on this rainy Saturday here as we come up on the final 15 kilometers of the race. Universal Sports brought to you by Earbuds. Never hurt, never fall out, never stop. Okay, so this is the front of the main field that's over 9 minutes behind our lone leader, Daniele Ratto here. He just has 1 climb left to go. The Colada de la Gallina, that is at the very end, a climb of just over 7 kilometers in length. He's got 11 kilometers left to go to the finish and looking pretty good for a stage win. Now his teammate, Ivan Basso, has just pulled out of the race. The team leader for Cannondale, sitting in 7th in the general classification, just inside of 3 minutes down, has abandoned because of the cold.
That's what we're hearing from out on the road. Basso out of the bike race. And Steve, there are a bunch of big hitters that are out of the race, as there's confirmation from Spain. The Spanish television graphic coming up saying Basso is out. So Ratto here, the man off the front. This is not a general classification issue, but it is a huge issue for him, as he has never before won a professional race, Steve. This is a guy that usually rides in the service of his team leaders like Ivan Basso, but today he went in that early move, and he is using that to good effect.
All right, so Gogo, this group of general classification contenders, they are on the climb of the Alto de la Colmeia, the Category 2 climb that summits with 16 kilometers left to go. You can see just how few riders there are here altogether. Vincenzo Nibali, the race leader, is here. So is Nicolas Roche. Alejandro Valverde, even though he's been suffering today, we think has made it back onto the tail end of that group. Nicolas Roche
dropped
as well
on the previous descent, so we haven't identified him yet, but he's been in trouble.
Nicolas Roche also there. Chris Horner, Joaquim Rodriguez. We're back to Ratto now, who has just about 10K left to go to the finish and 3 kilometers before the start of that final climb. So let's consider the general classification battle and what we might see the rest of the way as they have 2 summits left to go up here. What do you see that might happen?
I see a lot of these guys just marking each other until that final climb. However, with some of the struggles that we've seen with Valverde, and this is Valverde right here, second man in this group, so he is not back on that field. That reduced peloton does not have Valverde in it. He is still struggling, and even if he catches up, he's going to have a hard time staying with them on the descent, because that's where he got dropped. What I was just about to say, Steve, is typically you would see the guys maybe waiting for the final climb to attack each other, but because these descents are so sketchy, you might see a guy take, this is I think that's Pozzovivo, but I may be wrong. as everybody's so
That
covered
is
up.
off the front of that reduced main field, and hard to tell exactly how far behind Valverde is from these guys. He has apparently dropped off the back here, has a teammate with him, but he is no longer in contact with this group. Again, Nibali is here, Horner is here. We believe Nicholas Roach is. Valverde has lost a little time. Those are the top riders in the general classification, and again, no one else outside of Nibali, Roach, Valverde, and Horner within 2.5 minutes on the GC.
As we started the day, Basso was a man that we were still thinking had an outside shot at the podium, but he is now retired from the bike race. And Valverde, things are all going south for him right now. He's got plenty of teammates around him trying to coax him and help him back up. But this is not looking good for his general classification bid either at this point.
Hoping to get an accurate margin as to how far back Alejandro Valverde is from the main field right now as we're back up to the leader. And here we go. All right, 40 seconds. They're saying Rato still has a huge lead on the GC, and those riders in that reduced main field, and Rato perhaps riding into a stage win today if he can hold this gap all the way to the finish. This is the front of the reduced main field. 8:44 behind the solo leader, Daniele Rato of Cannondale, who is now starting the final of the 4 climbs on the day. The Gallina that sets up a summit finish at the end. It's a 7K climb. He is just starting it now. These riders well back of Rato on the road, so it looks like the Cannondale rider here on the left is going to pull away to a stage win. Now we're going to start to see that general classification battle take shape more. They're on the right-hand side of the screen. Alejandro Valverde is the big story from the GC group, losing contact over 45 seconds behind his biggest contenders right now, and it looks like slipping out of contention for the Vuelta win.
It really does. It looks pretty tragic for him in this general classification bid. Rato now with 550 over Philippe Gilbert, and at the same time we have Valverde, who has lost the contact, like you said, and he's not going to make it back up at this stage of the race. The body is sort of fighting him as much as the weather is. Steve, this interesting note about Daniele Rato. Last year, he abandoned the Vuelta on stage 12, and it was the first time a rider on his team had quit a Grand Tour in 4 years. Now he's trying to make good by winning the stage.
Yeah, at the time, the team known as Liquigas Cannondale had an amazing run of every single rider finishing a Grand Tour, something you rarely see from any team these days because of the punishing nature of these races.
Well,
So
you can just see a day like today. Basso's out of the race. He was one of the favorites for a final podium. There are so many things that can happen. You got 9 guys. To have them make it through every Grand Tour for 4 years is a huge accomplishment.
an ironic day for the Cannondale team here on stage 14. Ivan Basso has pulled out. His teammate Daniele Rato looks like he's on his way to the stage win on top of the Colada de la Gallina climb, where also ironically last year Alejandro Valverde was the winner on the stage, but today the opposite end of that spectrum. He is losing time and moving out of contention in the general classification. This is the final climb, a category 1 uphill in the last 7 kilometers of the race. Maximum slope at 11%, but pretty steep all the way to the finish of the race today.
Steve, in those 4.5 miles, it goes up 1,900 vertical feet.
This is the main field live in the rain, headed towards the base of that final climb. That is Nicholas Roach there in that white jersey for the Saxo Tinkoff team. Roach starting the day just 31 seconds behind Vincenzo Nibali in the overall and in second place. And we will be live and commercial free through the remainder of this race that has just 4.8 kilometers left to go for our leader Daniele Rato. 9K remaining for the reduced main field. It's almost 9 minutes behind the Cannondale rider. But the significant general classification development is Alejandro Valverde of the Movistar team losing contact with his main rivals. Right now about 40 seconds back. Start of the day tied on time with Horner. 46 seconds off of Nibali's overall lead. Horner and Roach still with Nibali in this group we're looking at right now. But Valverde may be seeing his Vuelta slipping away here on a cold and rainy day in the Pyrenees.
Steve, this is what we were talking about at the beginning of the day. A day like this, anybody can have a bad day. And if you have a bad day on a day like this, you can kiss those chances goodbye for an overall victory.
Winning on this stage last year in such dramatic fashion. It looked like Contador was going to pull away to a solo win. And then with Perito on his wheel, Valverde accelerating just inside of 3 kilometers to go, and then catching Contador inside the final 100 meters to pull off an incredible stage win on this very same climb.
It was such a battle last year between those 3 Spaniards, with Chris Froome sort of settling down just below the podium. But Rato today, the man looking very good. I don't see how he can lose this at this point. But that general classification battle from this group right here, you have to think some guys are going to be going for it. Typically, I don't think Horner is a real fan of this nasty, cold, rainy weather. And typically, you would think that Vincenzo Nibali, the overall race leader, is a little better suited for this. But you just don't know on a day like today what's going to come down. And you have to think that Perito Rodriguez is also going to want to go on the attack today. Valverde, the only man trying to move forward at this point. Everybody else pretty much going back.
Well, the time he lost earlier in the stage when he came off the back of that group with all of the other top overall contenders, that was on a descent. He didn't want to risk it in the rain and the dangerous conditions. Now that the road's going back uphill, this is more favorable terrain for him, and it looks like he has the legs and the strength. He's trying to pull back the time that he lost. Doesn't look like anybody's going to catch Rato. But now Valverde has a group of 3 around him, but he's not concerned about them. He's going to go forward.
Yeah, he's concerned about the guys up the road, but I still think it's too tall an order. I doubt he's actually going to make it back up to that group with the general classification men as we head on up with the motorcycle.
That's Roach. That was Roach in the white jersey. He's come off the back.
Second overall coming into the day, just over 30 seconds down.
And at the 5K banner, some other riders. Euskaltel, Danny Moreno in the green jersey for Katusha right here.
Moreno was suffering on the descent earlier as well, had to catch back up. That's Koenig, stage winner earlier on a summit finish, and here we are.
This is Nibali and Horner in this group. Of the 4 top overall contenders as the day started, it's just Nibali and Horner left here at the front of this small, reduced main field. Roach has lost time. Valverde has lost time.
And Rodriguez is there as well. So Kieselowski's still on the front. Horner right there with him. Horner looking back over his shoulder. I have a feeling Horner is thinking he's got a chance here. He's got his teammate Kieselowski on the front to keep the pace high.
Nibali is isolated. No teammates for him from Astana.
Yep, Rodriguez also isolated, but he's much further down in the general classification.
This is Rato. Starting to rock those shoulders back and forth. 2.5K from the summit finish. All right, so you have Horner behind his teammate Kieselowski in the blue and white polka dot jersey. Then Nibali here in the red jersey, the overall race leader. But the man sitting second overall, Nicholas Roach, has dropped out of the group. So has Alejandro Valverde, who started the day 46 seconds down, tied on time with Horner. He's lost time, but now trying to make it up. He's moving forward, it seems, behind that group. Nicholas Roach going backwards.
Well, the man that Nibali really needs to be paying attention to is Chris Horner. Horner comes in 46 seconds down, and he's the only guy who's been able to really get these big summit finish wins amongst the general classification men. So Nibali is just right on the wheel of Horner, and that's where he has been every time we've seen him on this climb.
So his teammate Horner right behind, and then Nibali is on Horner's wheel. Another acceleration by Kieselowski.
He's even got Joaquim Rodriguez in trouble, as Rodriguez now 5th man there. He has been gapped off slightly, as well as Sammy Sanchez.
2 kilometers left to go for the leader, Daniele Rato, looking for his first ever Grand Tour stage win. But behind him, the general classification battle really taking shape.
Wow.
Kieserlowski, huge turn to help Horner. Now he's dropping off, and Horner's on the move with Nibali behind him.
Oh, nice to see such a great effort by Kieserlowski. At this point, it's going to be Nibali just watching Horner the whole way up. Horner's got dual purpose here. One, get rid of Valverde so he can comfortably move into 2nd place in the standings. But 2, can he figure out a way to get rid of Vincenzo Nibali and gain back some time in the general classification for 1st place?
On each of the 2 stages that Horner has won, where he's taken the red jersey, he has been able to drop Nibali on the uphill finishes. So far, Nibali is right there here today.
And this is about 15% where Nibali and Horner are at this point. Rato a little further up. It's down below 10%, but still steep.
Rato, part of a bigger breakaway earlier in the day. He's the last man standing, and he's been riding by himself out front for quite a while now. And looking to hang on for a solo win. So Rato still at the front.
He's just completely falling apart, but he has such a big advantage. He should be able to easily hold on for the stage win. Back here, a lot more purpose coming from Horner and Nibali. And this is what I was talking about the other day, though. At this point, Horner is the big danger man for Nibali. He was the danger man coming into today. Nibali is watching him like a hawk.
So from our leader back to these 2, it's just under 7 minutes. And they're coming up on Philippe Gilbert.
Oh, Gilbert.
That is Philippe Gilbert just ahead. So they're going to move ahead of him. And now the 2nd place time bonus comes into play of 6 seconds.
I had a feeling Gilbert was falling apart on this final climb because he was already so far down when they got to the base of it.
So they ride past Philippe Gilbert, who was part of the day's early breakaway.
Yeah, don't expect him to get on the wheel either.
Won a stage a couple of days ago for the first time as the world champion, but now struggling as Horner and Nibali pass him here. They are now 2nd on the road behind this man, Daniele Rato. Celebrating the biggest moment of his professional career. Not only going to be his first pro win, first Grand Tour win, but he's going to do it in demonstrative fashion here. He's going to win by several minutes over some of the top climbers in the sport. Daniele Rato celebrates his win on stage 14 of the Vuelta.
That was well deserved. A nasty day. 4 hours and 24 minutes in the rain. 4 big mountains. Now we turn back to the general classification battle on the mountain.
Chris Horner and Vincenzo Nibali next on the road. Alejandro Valverde losing time earlier on a descent, but clawing his way back. Tomorrow and Monday will also offer up some summit finishes as Nibali now comes to the front.
And remember their time bonuses of 6 and 4. Oh, and he has dropped Horner.
Nibali leading Horner by 46 seconds as the day started. And now Vincenzo Nibali with an acceleration towards the finish. And there's going to be a little bit of a gap to Horner. Nibali finishes 2nd, takes a 6-second time bonus. Horner, a 4-second time bonus for 3rd on the stage. And now, Joaquim Rodriguez will be next to finish 4th. Perito, not too far away from where he lives. Crossing over the finish line after 4.5 hours.
Sammy Sanchez.
So that's the top 5. Now waiting for Alejandro Valverde. Where is he? And he's just in front of Thibaut Pinot. He'll be 6th, it looks like. But he has lost time to both Nibali and Horner.
A very good ride by Valverde on the final climb as he came in with that deficit, but he's still going to lose some valuable seconds.
So Valverde, Pinot, and Pozzovivo next across the line in the rain. So Daniele Rata wins the stage. Vincenzo Nibali extends his lead over Horner on the general classification.
There for Euskaltel coming in front.
And Leopold Koenig coming up next in the white and blue for NetApp Andurra. And we said coming in would not be bothered by the rain and the cold conditions, who would actually thrive given the elements, and that was the man in the red jersey, Vincenzo Nibali. That's exactly what happened in the end. But a little bit of time into Horner, put a lot of time into Nicolas Roche. 14 days deep into the Vuelta. Really now looks like a 2-man race. Nibali still on top. Chris Horner now into 2nd place. Vincenzo Nibali wearing the red jersey of overall leader now for the 4th consecutive day, as we move into the final week of racing at the season's final Grand Tour. About 225 kilometers, and it is up and down through those tough climbs all the way from start to finish.
And you can have a good look here as the guys started out on a Category 1 climb, just to add the insult to the injury of yesterday. They've been over the second Cat 1, headed back into France, and now 2 climbs remaining to the finish line at 10.5% max and over 13% max on the final climb.
And we are now live with the main field on the penultimate climb of the day. Just over 35 kilometers left to go for our leaders, who have a gap of just over 5 minutes right now on that peloton. Cardoso and Genier right here. We had a 5-man breakaway defining the stage earlier in the day during the course of some of the rain showers that have now relented. Genier, part of that early breakaway group, as the 25-year-old from FDJ got in the move. That team from France riding onto French soil today, looking for really their first big moment of this race, and he's there, number 104 in the blue.
And the other man, Cardoso, is a Portuguese rider on that Caja Rural squad, 29-year-old, 21st overall in last year's Vuelta, but that's not what he's thinking about. Today, these guys are thinking about glory, especially after Daniele Rata picked up the stage win from the early break yesterday in those horrible conditions.
Now, this climb will summit with just under 32 kilometers left to go in the stage, and then they have an intermediate sprint point coming up at 15 kilometers remaining before that final tough climb up into the French Pyrenees today. Peraguda is the finish of today's stage number 15. Ironically enough, last year at the Tour de France, it was the finish of stage number 17, and they're using it today in the Vuelta to pay homage to the 100th anniversary of the Tour, which occurred this year. What's at stake today? Plenty.
Yeah, plenty. 4 major climbs on this Queen stage of the race. And as I said before, it's not the single, none of the climbs are the single hardest climb of this year's Vuelta. That comes in stage 20 up the Langrelou climb. But 4 climbs back to back in the Pyrenees, big mountains, big weather, and this is a huge day for the general classification.
Temperature mostly in the 50s today. At some of the summits that the riders have already gone over, it's dropped down into the 40s. So another cold one in Spain, and actually covering 3 different countries on the map today, starting in Andorra, dropping down into Spain, and then winding up in France.
And you can get a little bit of an idea of just how tricky the bike racing is as you peer through these clouds. It's the climbs of these races are the most physically demanding, Steve, but it's the descents that are so incredibly treacherous. And Chris Anker Sorensen here on the front for Saxo Tinkoff. You know, these guys, they get it going on the uphills. They can warm their body up a little bit. It's brutal physically, but when they start going downhill on the wet roads, that's what really hammered guys yesterday.
Gogo, it has been a tough 2 weeks of racing already, and obviously yesterday was the hardest day. We saw what some of the riders said about yesterday's stage 14. How do you bounce back for stage 15 today in only 24 hours time when you have such another brutal stage awaiting?
You know, you have to recover well. You have to get warm right away. You have to get tons of calories into your system after the race yesterday. But today, once again, you have to eat immediately. Guys were probably eating in the rollout. There was a 20-kilometer, 12-mile neutral zone to start this race off, which brings the total distance today up to about 150 miles.
And it might surprise some people as we look at some of the big names who've already pulled out today. You've got Philippe Gilbert, Zdeněk Štýbar, both riders who've won stages at this year's Vuelta. They have pulled out here today along with many others, and that's really not a surprise.
Yeah, Tony Martin down there as well, getting ready for the Worlds. Now, I can tell you that Philippe Gilbert, his team has already confirmed that he is out of this race thinking about the Worlds coming up, and that's why he pulled out today.
All right, so we have two men at the front. The gap back to the field, 5:25. They're on the second to last climb and 34K left to go.
I think these guys have a much tougher task ahead of them for several reasons. One, their gap is not nearly as big and they're further away from the finish. Remember, Rato got to the final climb yesterday with about a 7 or 8 minute advantage. So that is a massive amount of time. Two, the weather is not as bad today, Steve. So the guys back here in this peloton being led by Chris Anker Sorensen, you can see the red jersey of Vincenzo Nibali, the overall leader. They're going to be feeling friskier. They got their battle game back a little bit. When you're freezing to death and you're out there on your bike in the rain, you're not, it's harder to feel aggressive and really organize a chase. Today, we're going to see more action back in the GC battle.
Well, this is one of 5 mountain stages in the last 7 days of this race. So still a lot of time for things to happen, but it's becoming more crystallized at the top of the general classification, which is Horner and Nibali within 1 minute of each other, and everybody else beyond a minute and a half down right now, and a lot of guys basically conceding that they can't battle for the win. It's now a competition for the podium and maybe a top 10 if they can't achieve that. As we look down at the field, the red jersey of Vincenzo Nibali right here, his 4th straight day in red, and Nibali apparently getting better and better. And unlike some of the riders, he has actually thrived in these conditions where it's cold, where it's wet. It doesn't seem to bother him the way it does some of the other riders that are around him in the peloton.
Some guys just do better than others in the cold, Steve. And, I thought it was really interesting to hear what Daniele Rato had to say after winning yesterday. He said the stage win was not an adequate consolation for losing his team leader Ivan Basso to the cold. And then he said, well, Basso is so lean, he can't handle the cold as well as he said he himself was fatter. And it made it easier for him in the cold conditions. And there's some truth to that. Body mass makes a difference in the cold. And like Chris Horner yesterday, full leg warmers in the race. Guys never do that. If they have anything, they may have knee warmers, but he had full leg warmers because he's so thin that the cold really can hurt him.
Basso said it was the saddest day of his career. He said that it took 3 or 4 people just to get him off his bike. He was a little dazed. He was confused, didn't really know what was going on, and he was really depressed to suffer from hypothermia and have to pull out like that. It really surprised him.
I'm sure it surprised a lot of people, as many of the guys were in big trouble. Fabian Cancellara there on the right side of your screen. He's been incredible in the mountains for Chris Horner. But yesterday, it was Kieserlowski, who we just passed with the red jersey right behind Horner and the white jersey of combination. Kieserlowski is the man who really dialed up the pace and blew it up. And then Horner went from there, and only Nibali could follow his wheel. But Nibali knew exactly where he needed to be. He watched one man and one man only.
And now back to our 2 leaders in the green and white. That is André Cardoso of Caja Rural team and Alexander Genier in the blue, Frenchman for FDJ on this climb where it hits 8% as they drop down inside 32 kilometers left to go to the finish, climbing up through the clouds here.
Cardoso, just to let you know, as they come up to this summit finish, let's see what we do here, if we have any gamesmanship or not.
Well, that's Nicholas Roach.
Well, he wants a little bit more back after a somewhat disastrous day for him. 6 kilometers from the top yesterday, coming unglued as Horner really put the hammer down and losing over 2.5 minutes.
All right, so our 2 leaders go over the summit of the 3rd Category 1 climb. Still have 1 more to go at the very finish of the stage. Yeah, Nicholas Roach now just off the front of the top general classification contenders. Roach really having the race of his life. He's worn the red jersey. He's won a stage. He's been in contention throughout the race until yesterday when he lost almost 4 minutes.
Yeah, really tough for a guy to go from second just straight out of the GC like that in one fell swoop. And Steve, as we see Roach here over in front of the peloton as they get to the close to the summit of the 3rd climb of the day, I do want to let everybody know that Nicholas Aday was in that group of 28 riders earlier, and he got maximum points on both of the first 2 mountains. So he actually is the virtual leader of the mountains classification now with 33 points. That's 3 points more than Rato, who had it yesterday. And Rato, also another funny thing he said was after the finish yesterday. Look at this. This is the Rato move on the descent.
That's what he was doing yesterday. Genier doing the same thing here today.
But yesterday, Rato also said after the race that he was stoked to have the mountains jersey, but he would only have it for 1 day and he would lose it today.
All right, there's an FDJ rider on the back of Nicholas Roach now. And they are again just a few seconds ahead of the main field. There are some chasers between this field and our 2 leaders. We're not seeing them because they don't have television coverage of the chasers, who are also remnants of the early breakaway from earlier today. One of those is the man you just mentioned, Nicholas Aday. Also Warren Barguil, a rider from Argos Shimano, who's won a stage, Francis de Grief, and Michael Chirel of AG2R. So those riders are in between Nicholas Roach here and our 2 leaders at the front of the stage, and Roach just a few seconds ahead of this reduced main field, riding through the mist, and our leaders now with exactly 30 kilometers and 1 climb left to go. Now look at this, Genier now pulling away from Cardoso at the front. These are the time gaps that we were just referencing with some riders in between out there on the road. And a lot of twisting switchbacks going up this climb. Nicholas Roach at the top of the picture on this climb that's 19 kilometers altogether. Average gradient of 6%. So what do you make of this move by Roach here?
Well, this is an interesting move because you really have to look at all the possibilities. So if you're one of the guys in the group right behind him, you have to say, what is Roach doing? Is he going after trying to get some time back to move up to the podium? He'll need about 2.5 minutes to do that. Is he trying to maybe just feel out the group and say, you know what, they're not that motivated, maybe I can get a stage win, maybe I can get across to the leaders? Is he going for mountain points? There are all these different possibilities in the bike race for him. Now, one of the things that's important to realize is that Roach is, well, the guy who came into the race as the team leader, Roman Kreuziger, is now out of the race. He's been suffering in the mountains. So Roach is really it for that team. He's the guy that all the pressure is riding on, and he's got to have one of those options in mind right now. He's not working for anybody but himself, and I think this may be a bid for a podium spot more than trying to win a stage.
When you get this deep in a very tough Grand Tour and the field of true general classification contenders starts to get streamlined, all of a sudden guys change their priorities and their ambitions. Some go from looking to win to maybe just trying to get on the podium. Others are trying to protect the general classification spots somewhere in the top 5 or the top 10, and then some just want a stage win. So you have different ambitions on the road right now. And for this FDJ rider, Alexander Genier, he looks as though he's going try and stay out front as long as possible and maybe stay away for a stage win.
Yeah, certainly that's his ambition on a day like today. It's all about trying to win a stage, and anything he can do to get that stage win is what he's going to go for. If that means riding with another rider and then jumping him late or going on early, he's got to size that up in the moment.
So Roach just going over the summit of the third Category 1 climb and now on the descent, and well, he picks up one of his teammates who had already been up the road in between, it looks like. As he's now on the descent, so is the rest of the general classification right here, the small reduced main field, with Horner right behind Nibali. Again, Nibali's in a red jersey, Horner a white jersey today. And this is the rider at the very front of the race, Genier, the 25-year-old Frenchman for FDJ.
He's got the modified top tube sit there, and now that's Majka who came back from the breakaway for Roach. Now, a lot of guys, when they get over the top, they'll put on their jackets because there's so much wind chill on the descent. But the two men here, Roach and Majka, you don't see them taking the time to put on their jackets, and that's because every second counts for them. So they're taking a little bit of a risk and say, look, we're going to get cold on the descent, but we don't want to spend the time just sitting up and getting the jacket on.
Would you have thought that other riders who are close to Roach in the general classification and trying to protect their spots would have tried to go with him, sat on his wheel, and at least marked the move?
Well, here's a big part of the race strategy today. It's like, are you going to try and protect third place in the general classification, or are you here to try and win this race overall? And so if you want to talk about that, you talk about, well, I talked with Josu Larrazabal, one of the directors for Chris Horner yesterday, and at 9:45 p.m. they were just getting ready to have dinner. So that's how long their day was. But basically I said, is Chris going to ride for the win, or is he going to ride to protect his place on the podium? Because they're very different. And he said, Chris is here to win this race. And that means that any guys that go up the road that threat second place, Horner is not going to mess with. They're going to force Espana to chase and try and work those guys over all day. Chris doesn't care if he's second or third. He wants to be first.
Has 5 mountain stages to get that red jersey back for what would be the third time in the race. Our two Saxo riders here giving chase with under 25K left. And now down to the final 22 kilometers of this 15th day of racing, second of 3 consecutive days in the Pyrenees, in northeastern Spain, southwestern France, and today in France for the remainder of this very difficult mountain stage featuring 4 Cat 1 climbs. They've gone over 3 of those, now just 1 left to go, coming right at the finish for the final 17 kilometers of the race. Thibaut Pinot, Igor Anton just off the front of this reduced main field here. And again, that's Alexander Genier, our leader, part of a big breakaway earlier. That group has come apart. There are riders scattered between him and the main field. And he's the lone man out front now with 21K left. And now time for one of our Twitter questions coming in throughout the race. Iowa Kathy wants Go-Go to tell us why riders abandon in the feed zone, and surmising that perhaps the bus is right there, so why not? You can hop right in and get a ride to the finish town.
Well, good morning, Iowa Kathy, and I do have to say it is all about convenience. The bus may be at the finish line, but you still have the Soigneurs there in the feed zone, and they have their team car, and so you can get in there. And a lot of times, if you talk with the support staff of the riders, before the riders get to the feed zone, you can hear them milling about and saying, I hope our guys don't pull out when they see us, because it's an easy out, right? But on a day like yesterday and a day like today, a lot of guys so beat up, they can't resist. And that's the point where they're like, if I can just make it to the feed zone, I at least have a place to get some shelter.
Sure, it's not to sit down and have a nice leisurely lunch as opposed to riding on a bike.
Well, and actually yesterday, at least one rider got in the team car, had the heat on full blast, ate and drank some hot liquids, spent about 10 minutes in the car, and then got back out on the bike.
And lost those 10 minutes in the overall standings as well. Keep the Twitter questions coming at BeachyGoGo, hashtag La Vuelta in this final week of the season's final Grand Tour. With our lone leader, Alexander Genier. He's under 20 kilometers left to go to the finish of stage 15. And we come back to our two riders from Saxo Bank, Nicholas Roach, Oliver Zog here giving chase. It was Roach just a short while ago attacking from that small field of general classification riders. Zog came back from an earlier breakaway. He was one of the stragglers on the road. They've teamed up now in pursuit of our lone leader, Alexander Genier, out front now with 17 kilometers left to go. This is that reduced main field. And near the front, you have the red jersey of the overall leader, Vincenzo Nibali. He's sitting second wheel with two teammates bracketing him. Then behind them, fourth wheel, is Chris Horner, the American in a white jersey.
So you look at that gap between Roach and Zog, 5 minutes. That is a massive gap for Roach to actually get across. Now, Zog is going to do everything he can to just bury himself on this descent and as far up the final climb as he can be of good service to Roach. But, I don't think that Roach is going to be able to catch both of the men that are in front of him. It seems highly unlikely at this stage of the game.
Well, what this might be for Nicholas Roach is just a GC play, because currently he's now 6th in the general classification, maybe just trying to move up into the top 5 and perhaps incrementally work his way back up to potentially a podium spot by the end of the race.
And he doesn't need a ton of time to move up into the top 5. He needs just about 30 seconds to pass Domenico Pozzovivo. So it probably is more than anything that GC move, like you just pointed out, Steve. I don't see how he's going to be able to get a stage win out of this. And that's assuming that they can stay in front of the field. They may get pulled up, pulled in on the final climb, because the GC battle is going to be fierce.
All right, so here's our leader, Alexander Genier, and he is starting the final climb of the day, the last of the 4 Category 1s. Officially, 16.7 kilometers in length, averages just over 4.5%, with the maximum slope coming pretty early, about 2K%. Rest of the field still several minutes back. And again, no big moves being made by anybody back. Riding almost side by side at various points near the front of this group. So when they come into the final climb, you think about tactics and strategy for Chris Horner. Outside of just one guy being substantially stronger than the other, what can happen? What do you think might be the possibilities Horner would exercise to try and take back time today?
The challenge today for Chris Horner is, even though the climb is a beast at 10 miles in length, and even though it goes up 2,600 feet, you still have those shallower grades throughout the last third to half of the climb. And so that means the speeds are higher, therefore the draft is a bigger part of the picture. And with Nibali knowing that Horner is the danger man in the bike race for GC, Nibali sits on his wheel. And Horner does not have a super sharp acceleration. So it's going to be really tough for Chris. He has a massive job in front of him to get rid of Nibali today.
And it looks like that's the sprint banner at just over 15 kilometers from the finish for our leader, Alexander Genier, the only man on the final climb at this moment. With just under 12 kilometers left to go on stage number 15 of the Vuelta a Espana, Nicholas Roach of Saxo Bank has his teammate Oliver Zog with him, trying to move back up in the general classification after dropping down several spots yesterday. He started stage 14 in 2nd place, starts today in 6th, so trying to move back into the top 5. He attacked from this group that includes the other top general classification riders a while ago, and now trying to put time into them as other riders from an early breakaway continue to come back. And now it looks like a Katusha rider, maybe a couple of them, starting to make a move off the front of that group. Daniel Moreno, it looks like, is the rider now coming up the middle of the road.
And Sergio now on the right side of your screen is coming back from that initial group that was so big, 28 riders.
Now Moreno has already won 2 stages and worn the red leader's jersey here at this year's Vuelta.
Moreno here trying to do whatever he can to help set up his team leader, Joaquim Rodriguez. And so by getting up the road and just hanging out up there and getting a little bit of a gap, if nobody really responds, well, then if Rodriguez really punches it and comes up to him, then he can pace him on this climb. Remember, pacing will be very effective. It's not super steep.
Daniel Moreno also second in the points competition, which is the battle for the green jersey, currently being led by Alejandro Valverde. So he could try to work his way back into the lead there, but they are slowly reeling him back in.
Yeah, they definitely see the danger of letting a guy like Moreno go up the road. So Valverde's teammate closed down that breakaway attempt by Moreno, and now has swung off the road, is completely out, and we're down to maybe 10, 12 guys.
So Moreno at the front, followed by Kieselowski, the teammate of Horner, who is right behind him in that white jersey. Then the red jersey of overall leader Vincenzo Nibali, who has a teammate behind him, followed by the green jersey of Alejandro Valverde, who leads the points competition and is also in third place in the general classification.
So the selection really starting quite early on this climb, and honestly, the harder this climb is, the better for anybody to try and upset Nibali.
Just inside of 11 kilometers left to go for the leader Ginier, who's still quite a ways up the road. Anytime you see that kilometer mark in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, that's always where the leader of the race is, not where this group of the general classification riders is at that point.
I was wondering if we were going to see an attack right there from Horner as he was looking around. It had just been a hard effort. Everybody's legs stretched a little bit.
And now here is our leader, Ginier. Well, it will go downhill with 4 kilometers left to go to the finish, then back uphill to the 1K mark, and then it kind of levels off from there to the finish. But still a ways to go before they get there. As more of the stragglers are dropping back. And still almost 6 minutes back to this group from our leader. So with Nibali, Horner, Valverde, Rodriguez all in this group right here. If you need time, when do you attack? Obviously Nibali can just sit and wait as the leader, but if you're Chris Horner, when would you make a move?
The most important thing about your attack is not to let the course dictate it so much today as the intensity of the race. So if the race gets really hard and a bunch of guys make some really hard efforts on the front of this group or off the front of this group that this group ends up chasing down and closing the gap to, that's the timing you want. That's what Chris used when he won earlier in the race on the big summit finish on stage 10, because he knew once it was really hard, everybody's at their limit and you attack and nobody can help anybody else out.
There is Ginier, our leader, coming up on the 10K mark, and now Alejandro Valverde to the front of this group with an acceleration. Again, Valverde was the one who won on this climb in 2012 in stage 17 of the Tour de France, and now he's on the move after losing time yesterday here in the Vuelta.
And look at this, Nibali going on the attack. Never would have expected that, but Horner right on his wheel.
He's right there, and they have a slight gap to the others.
This is exactly what Chris needs. If Nibali really digs in hard, if Horner has anything left, it's the time to try and hit him after he's been on the front.
Are you surprised Nibali made that move?
I actually am. I expected that Nibali would just follow wheels. Does Horner go here?
Side by side, and Nibali's talking to him. They're actually having a little conversation here. What do you think that's about?
It's a good question. There are a lot of things they could be discussing.
10K for our leader on the road for the stage, Alexander Ginier, with a 5.5-minute lead.
I'm a little surprised that Chris didn't try and attack right there. He must have been right at his limit. Now Rigoberto Urán up the left side. And so he is a guy who is not going to be watched, and they're just going to let him go.
So you have Vincenzo Nibali in the red jersey, Horner the white. Behind them, Joaquim Rodriguez in the red and white for Katusha. You still have the green jersey of Alejandro Valverde, who attacked a moment ago. In a blue jersey, it's Thibaut Pinot, who's also pretty high up in the general classification. Horner does have a teammate in Robert Kieselowski, and Nibali has a teammate for Astana just getting back onto the tail end of that group as well.
And if I were Chris Horner right now, I would say, Kieserlowski, go to the front, bury yourself, absolutely bury yourself, and make this as hard as possible, and then Horner has to attack.
So Iran here not getting much of a leash as other riders come back from up the road from the early breakaway. Kieserlowski alongside Horner. They're 3 wide there along the barrier.
Yeah, this is all very much a race of poker right now. These guys just looking at each other. And honestly, the way Valverde lit it up with that attack, I thought maybe we would have a bunch of stuff. And then we saw the overall leader, Vincenzo Nibali, go on the attack. And then I thought, okay, we really have the racing on right now. But they've dialed it back. Now they're looking at each other again. This man here, I think Genier is going to go ahead and ride off and win the stage.
It's like Thibaut Pinot attacking in that blue kit for FDJ from that field. It is indeed. He's coming up on the back of Iran, currently 7th in the general classification for Thibaut Pinot, 4.5 minutes down on Nibali.
That's a really smart move by Pinot because, as you said, if he's 4.5 minutes down, they're going to give him a little breathing room, and he is definitely going to take it. As
looks
he
like
said,
Rodriguez
just started getting good.
Perito Rodriguez has made a move behind these two. Got Pinot at the front, followed by Iran, and then it looks like Joaquin Rodriguez is the rider just behind them.
Pinot, Iran, Rodriguez, Nibali, Horner, Valverde, Kieserlowski, and Pozzovivo in that group, in that order.
Looks like that might be Mikel Landa for Euskaltel as well. All right, this is back to the very front with Alexander Genier, the teammate of Thibaut Pinot, at the 9K banner.
Genier has done this race 3 times, and Pinot back on the attack. They may eventually let him go.
Well, Pinot has his teammate up the road. And the rider coming back, Daniel Moreno, there from the front as Pinot pulls up. Now it's Moreno along with Perito, the 2 Katusha riders. Thibaut Pinot in the blue at the very front. You still have Nibali in the red, Horner the white, Valverde the green, and here's the acceleration by Perito, it looks like. Joaquin Rodriguez, 1:15 off the podium at this point. Horner now marks him. Nibali comes up in the others as well. And Joaquin Rodriguez said yesterday it was the worst suffering of his life in the cold and nasty conditions. Still hasn't looked at his best in this Vuelta as Pinot comes back to the front, surging once more, followed by Rodriguez, Horner, Nibali, and Valverde. So a lot of action developing in this group.
Pinot really showing that he wants to get something here today, but they are just not letting him go because those GC men are all chasing each other.
Well, for Nibali, it's still a good situation with riders up the road because with time bonuses at the finish of 10, 6, and 4 seconds, if those riders eat up those bonuses, it's perfect for Nibali. He doesn't need them. A guy like Horner could certainly benefit from getting to the front of this race, but that's a tall order at this point. So if Horner takes time today, it might just have to be physical time in dropping Nibali somewhere out on the climb.
Pinot going again on the left side of the favorites group. Landa here coming back.
And it looks like this could be Igor Anton, his teammate, trying to come up to the back of him in the unzipped orange jersey for Euskaltel.
I think it's Sammy Sanchez.
Oh, no, it is Sanchez, yes.
Sammy Sanchez, the winner of the Beijing Olympic road race. And he's struggled throughout this Vuelta a bit, but he's been coming a little bit
Oh, here goes
better.
Rodriguez. Another surge by Perito. He's going to go by Sanchez. Pinot move to the front and maybe try to make this one stick if he can.
Now this is when Horner or Valverde or Pinot, once Nibali closes this down to Rodriguez, that's where those other guys need to hit him. It's when he's been in the wind, then you hit him.
Joaquin Rodriguez was one of the favorites for this race coming in, but he's never looked to be at his best. He went so deep to finish on the podium at the Tour de France, perhaps never fully recovered. And so he hasn't really been close to winning a stage, or hasn't really been in that general classification conversation for the red jersey the way he typically is here at his home Grand Tour.
And Steve, quite honestly, I would say if one of those guys had the legs to attack right then, to attack Nibali, they would have. I think they're all, when Nibali closed down that gap, everybody's at their limit.
This is our leader, Alexander Gignac. He's been at the front by himself for quite a while now. He can look over his shoulder and see the other riders down the hill because it's so wide open and exposed there. Now Nibali at the front of this group, Horner just off his right. Nibali in red, Horner white, Valverde green.
Have done at this point over 140 miles today. Now the first 12 were neutral, but it's a huge day in the saddle. 140 miles of racing, 12 miles of neutral to start the day off.
So Nibali without a teammate. Horner still has Kieselowski pacing him at the front. How much will that matter?
Kieselowski just has to keep this pressure on for Chris, Steve. To me, it's all about making the race hard, because otherwise Chris is not going to get away. If Nibali can get a casual ride up the mountain, casual in relative terms, I might add, he's going to be able to mark Chris. The harder this is, the more likely it is that a danger man will get away from Nibali, and then Nibali will have to do some chasing. And if he chases seriously, then that sets him up for other guys to attack him once he spends time in the wind.
Our leader Alexander Gignac here on that downhill section we talked about that comes with inside of 7 kilometers left to go to the finish. It'll go downhill until about 4K left to go. And so he has about another kilometer of heading downhill. Then it goes back up to the 1K mark before it kind of levels off all the way to the line.
Oh, Michele Scarponi, there's a man we don't see very often in this year's Vuelta. In the pink jersey for Lampre.
He was in one big breakaway on one stage, was out front by himself for a while, perhaps thinking about a stage win before eventually being caught. As we move back further down the road, picking up other riders still scattered about. That select group of general classification riders here now whittled down even further. Just over a half dozen, it looks like. Kieselowski at the front, followed by his teammate Horner. And now Gignac at that 4K banner makes a left-hand turn, and the road starts to go back uphill.
It's so interesting how the dynamics of a bike race make such a big difference in the general classification battle. If all those GC men in that group refuse to help out Nibali, Nibali could lose this race. He doesn't have the help of teammates. So if Valverde were to attack and everybody just sits there and watches him go and Nibali has to chase him, and then Rodriguez attacks and then Horner attacks, they'll eventually crack him. But what ends up happening is guys race for their place in the top 5 or their place on the podium. That's more important to them than trying to win, because they think winning is out of touch. And that's what allows an isolated rider, even though he's very strong, that's what allows Vincenzo Nibali to hold on to that jersey.
It's so difficult in a race like this to get so many of your competitors on the same page and get everybody working towards the same goal. As Sammy Sanchez is with Leo Koenig here, losing a little time to that group. But to get everybody going for the same goal, to work against one guy, it could work if they could achieve that, but it rarely happens that way.
Rarely happens, and in fact, when Ryder Hesjedal was in a place to win the Giro d'Italia last year, he actually got into the point where all the guys were looking at him and they were starting to launch up the road in this valley, and he was in trouble because no one would help him. He waited for his American teammate Pete Stetina to make it up from the group behind. Stetina went to the front and just rode tempo. Meanwhile, up the road, Christian Vande Velde was in the break. He came back, and they saved the day for Ryder. But otherwise, Ryder may have lost the jersey on that day.
All right, our leader, Alexander Gignac, just about to hit the 3-kilometer to-go banner. Our general classification group with Horner, Nibali, and the others, they are just about to hit the downhill portion where we saw Gignac on a short time ago. Back up to 9% here. And if you're wondering if something may happen back in that group on the downhill. Consider that Nibali is one of the best descenders in the entire world, so don't expect anybody to get away from him there.
Yeah, now here it's almost 12% on parts of this climb. He's up to 10 now. It gets up to virtually 12%, and so it's still steep, and you may still see somebody taking a shot really late on the climb.
Valverde sitting fourth in the green. And going to start to go downhill here for this small group.
So, Steve, as you were just saying, you know, they're 6 hours, 12 minutes into this race. And if you look back at their season, they do some training rides this long, not very many in terms of hours in the saddle. But they also don't have that many race days that are this long, 6 hours plus in the saddle. So you get to a point where, okay, you're so far into this bike race, 15 days. You've had one rest day so far. This is the second day in the Pyrenees. And there's always that chance for the bad day. We've seen guys have bad days on different days throughout this race. Today at over 6 hours, you still have an opportunity for somebody to really crack.
Now, Horner really needs Nibali to have that one day. And we always talk about that in the final week of a Grand Tour. The problem is, as this group hits 5K to go, when you have someone as experienced...
And over 50 miles an hour,
right,
by the way.
When you have someone as experienced and accomplished as Vincenzo Nibali, he's already won 2 Grand Tours in his career, you don't often see that one bad day.
You don't. And one of the things that comes with that experience is that poise where you don't get nervous. You don't waste a lot of energy being nervous. You eat, you drink, you take care of yourself. Your teammates take care of you. They all have faith in you. Everything works well in those situations. Now, a day like yesterday in the pouring down rain and temperatures as low as the low 40s, that's a much more critical day in terms of things going wrong. Today, even though it's super long, tons of climbing, almost probably about 19,000 feet of climbing today. It's a massive day, but don't expect Nibali to mess it up.
It looks like Alexander Ginier is following in the footsteps of Daniele Ratto, who yesterday was the last man from a breakaway, rode by himself for the last several kilometers, had a big lead and maintained most of it to win the stage. That is what is happening with the French rider here as Sammy Sanchez launches another move in the orange from back here in the Nibali-Horner group.
And Sammy Sanchez is a bit further down, 7 minutes and 10 seconds, just outside of the top 10. So once again, the real true GC men will not really be concerned with him when he goes up the road.
And not getting much of a margin here. Two kilometers left to go for the 25-year-old Frenchman. Sammy Sanchez well back, just in front of the small general classification group. Sanchez lost a lot of time right at the start of this Vuelta. His overall ambitions were pretty much over before they even started. So now just trying for some measure of redemption for this Euskaltel team that was going to be basically disbanding at the end of this season. Now Fernando Alonso, the Formula One driver, is going to step in, take over the team, and probably reinvent them in some fashion. May not be known as Euskaltel, but they'll still be around in some form going forward. And now Sanchez brought back. Perito Rodriguez leading the group.
And the red jersey now.
Nibali losing a couple of spots here.
This is that steep part, 12%. So Perito doing one of his trademark accelerations in the steep stuff. Nibali looks like he's struggling just a little bit. He's trying to move up around Rigoberto Urán, get on the wheel of Valverde.
Horner still looks good.
This is a shot right here. Come on, Horner. Come on, anybody who wants to win this race. This is your moment to try and get some time on Nibali.
This is as steep as the climb will get the rest of the way, as steep as it's been since the early portion of the climb. Horner now at the front of that group.
And Horner looks like he's trying to go a little bit, but Nibali is starting to come around the other riders. Nibali now into the third spot.
Meantime, Ginier at the front, a kilometer and a half away from victory. So Horner followed by Valverde in the green, and then Nibali in the red. Rodriguez has dropped back to fourth wheel, followed by Domenico Pozzovivo.
And you can see Valverde is roasting right now. He's got the long sleeve base layer on, and you just can't strip that off like arm warmers. And so he's got the jersey unzipped. Very hard to regulate your temperature on a day like this, where they've had cold temperatures as low as in the 40s and rain, and then warmer temperatures now.
A group of 5 there on the right-hand corner of the screen, led by Chris Horner. Less than 2 months shy of his 42nd birthday. And at the very front, a Frenchman poised to win in France in the Spanish Grand Tour. His teammate Thibaut Pinot, middle of the screen in the blue, trying to make it back up to that group on the right, but having trouble. Horner here out front. Missing so much of this season because of the knee injury. Missed the Tour de France, came back to finish second at the Tour Utah before coming here to the Vuelta, where he's won 2 stages, worn the red jersey twice, now 50 seconds back in second place, and the man who leads him, Vincenzo Nibali, sitting 2 wheels behind him right now.
And Steve, that was Chris Horner. That was his move, and it wasn't a big searing attack. It was just putting on that steady pressure and trying to drop Nibali and all the others, but they have just lined up on his wheel, and it does not look like the American is going to be able to break free. This is the reason right here.
First ever Grand Tour stage win for Alexander Ginier, and it's going to be a comfortable one as he rides in solo and soaks in the moment after 6 hours and 20 minutes at the top of the climb in the Pyrenees.
Beautiful day for him as he gets a convincing win. And back on the mountain, we still have the general classification men locked in battle.
See who's going to get those time bonuses. Ginier got the maximum of 10 seconds for finishing first. There's also 6 seconds and 4 seconds for second and third.
And the challenge right now is we don't know how many guys are still in between this group of the GC favorites and the man who just won, Ginier, because there were 28 riders scattered out there on the mountain.
The winner, Rato, his first Grand Tour stage win yesterday. Ginier, same accomplishment today. Now Nibali leading this group, followed by Horner, Valverde, Rodriguez, and Pozzovivo. No big surges, though, from anybody here.
I tell you, Vincenzo Nibali looks unstoppable. He goes to the front, he rides the tempo. He's basically responded to every move he had to. Nicholas Roach trying to hang on in front of that group.
Well, he attacked them quite a while ago, trying to improve his general classification placing, starting the day 6th, after losing almost 4 minutes yesterday from his 2nd place overall. So he really dropped and now is trying to move back up.
He needs just over 30 seconds to gain a spot to move into the top 5, and that would be over Pozzovivo, who is still in this group right at the back.
Horner just sitting on Nibali. Remember Valverde, who was 3rd there in the green jersey, won on this climb in a stage of the Tour de France back in 2012. And Roach just under the 1K banner and just ahead of this group led by Nibali.
And Nibali's starting to really dig in right now with an acceleration. Pozzovivo in trouble, and Roach is going to be in trouble as well, trying to stay away.
He's trying to distance himself from those others behind him, trying to gain time on the general classification riders. This is the actual gap that they were trying to show us there, but now they pick up
Michele Scarponi, who had been in that early move.
Yeah, so he was part of the early breakaway. It looks like he'll be next up to the finish line.
And so with all the chaos out on the road, the question is there another man between Scarponi and the others?
Other than Nicholas Roach.
Exactly.
Who it looked like was about to be picked up, or at least they were very close to him.
It seemed to me that they were going to suck up Nicholas Roach. Scarponi 2nd on the stage, picking up the 6-second time bonus along the way, but he won't care about that. He's nowhere in the general classification.
Road leveling out here in the final 1 kilometer. There's Roach behind him.
That did look like Roach, so everybody coming close together here. So all 3
3 time bonuses have been accounted for. And now the general classification riders coming in behind. Nibali sprinting against Valverde for 4th place.
I tell you, Nibali looks really hungry. There's not even a time bonus left, and he's still out sprinting Valverde and the others.
Nibali, Valverde, Horner, Rodriguez, and Pozzovivo in that order crossing over the finish line. So Nibali further enhances his stranglehold at the top of the general classification. Alexander Gignet leading Michele Scarpone across the line. Scarpone over 3 minutes back, and then it was Nicolas Roche, followed by the Nibali, Valverde, Horner, Rodriguez group just behind.